On this edition for Sunday, March 1st, a look ahead to what's at stake on Super Tuesday. New concerns over the coronavirus outbreak. And in our signature segment, the legacy of photographer Jim Marshall lives on through his iconic imagery. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Bernard and Irene Schwartz, Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Rosalind P. Walter, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments.
Consumer Cellular offers no-contract wireless plans that are designed to help you do more of the things you enjoy. Whether you're a talker, texter, browser, photographer, or a bit of everything, our U.S.-based customer service team is here to find a plan that fits you. To learn more, go to consumercellular.tv.
Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. From the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center in New York, Hari Srinivasan.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Former Vice President Joe Biden won his first primary yesterday, beating Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders by almost 30% in South Carolina.
Win big or lose, that's the choice. Most Americans don't want the promise of revolution. They want more than promises. They want results.
When NBC's Chuck Todd asked this morning if he believed, quote, Bernie Sanders would lead the Democratic Party to a big loss, Biden said,
I do. I think Bernie Sanders' position on a number of the issues, even the Democratic Party, are going to be very controversial.
The former vice president received 48.4% to Senator Sanders' 19.9%. Third place finisher, billionaire businessman Tom Steyer, dropped out after getting just 11.3%.
But I said if I didn't see a path to winning, that I'd suspend my campaign. And honestly, I can't see a path where I can win the presidency.
Second place finisher Bernie Sanders conceded South Carolina, putting the focus instead on Super Tuesday states, including Virginia, where he held his rally last night.
And that will not be the only defeat. There are a lot of states in this country. Nobody wins them all. I want to congratulate Joe Biden on his victory tonight. And now we enter Super Tuesday in Virginia.
In the race to capture enough delegates to win the Democratic nomination, Sanders now leads with 58. Biden has 50. And former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Senators Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar are the only others with delegates as of Sunday afternoon. We will have more on what's facing the candidates on Super Tuesday when 14 states hold their Democratic primaries coming up after the news summary. The new coronavirus has now spread to more than 60 countries, and more confirmed cases are being reported in the United States. Yesterday, Washington State reported the first death from the virus. There are now more than 70 confirmed cases in the U.S., with officials in Illinois and Rhode Island each reporting their first, quote, presumed positive cases since yesterday. In France, where the number of cases is now more than 100, the Louvre Museum closed its doors to visitors today. The government has canceled large indoor public gatherings of more than 5,000. In China, where the outbreak began 2 months ago, there were 573 new cases reported today. It's the first time in 5 days that the number has exceeded 500 new cases. For more on the Washington State outbreak, Los Angeles Times Seattle Bureau Chief Richard Reed joins us now. What's the latest there? Any new cases that are reported?
Yes, today there are 2 more people, men in their 60s, who are in critical condition here after contracting the virus.
And is this related to the facility, the long-term care facility that we were talking about or interested in yesterday?
I don't believe it is, and that's part of what's concerning officials. We haven't gotten a lot of details about these 2 men, but the person who died, a man in his 50s, had underlying health conditions And he was apparently not connected to this nursing facility where they're having an outbreak.
So how do we, if it's not somebody that is connected to that facility, does that mean that he got it from somebody else, somewhere else?
The strange thing about him, it's a mystery. So far, they know that he wasn't traveling, and there's no known contact that he had with a coronavirus patient. So that's what's concerning the authorities. He ended up dying at a hospital in Kirkland, which is the same hospital that one of the nursing home patients was sent to. And apparently they had never crossed paths before.
Are the people in that nursing home being tested, or what were the results if they were so concerned about that spot?
Yes, there are about 50 residents and staff there who have respiratory symptoms. And so the CDC has sent in a team of 10 to investigate and to take over the organizing the testing. For some reason, they're not testing them at the facility. So from what we're told, they have to bring them out to a local hospital for tests and then back there again.
Now, you went there earlier today. What was the scene like?
I spoke to some of the neighbors. They're anxious, as you might expect, and they're trying to take precautions. They've, disinfected their own homes. A couple of them were heading out to a grocery store to get supplies in case they're told to stay inside. So it's a developing situation around that neighborhood.
Are there a lot of people in the Seattle area that are heading to grocery stores and trying to stock up now?
Yes, I would say there are. I mean, when you walk around the downtown here, you don't see people in masks, or it looks pretty much the same. But if you go to Costco, there are lines out front of the store, people running in to get things. Some of the grocery store aisles, the aisles with the water or the medical supplies are getting very bare.
And finally, I want to ask also about that teenager. How did he get it?
The high school student, again, that's a mystery. He got tested when he had respiratory symptoms, and he was waiting for the test results and was feeling better. So on Friday, he went to school briefly. And then Friday night, it came back positive. And so now that school is being disinfected. It'll be closed on Monday, the same with another school in Oregon.
Richard Reed, the Seattle bureau chief of the LA Times, joining us via Skype tonight. Thanks so much.
Happy to do it.
The path to peace in Afghanistan hit its first snag today, one day after the U.S. and the Taliban signed a conditional peace agreement. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani told reporters in Kabul today that he will not free as many as 5,000 Taliban fighters as part of a prisoner exchange program. The Taliban would be required to release 1,000 Afghan prisoners. The exchange is seen as a confidence-boosting measure between the Afghan government and the Taliban before intra-Afghan power-sharing talks begin next week in Oslo, Norway. Thousands of Syrian migrants continue to gather at Turkey's border with Greece today in hopes of entering Europe. Syrians fleeing civil war have overwhelmed Greek authorities since Turkey opened its border yesterday. The Greek army and police have responded with tear gas and stun grenades to repel the migrants from entering the country. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has frequently threatened to allow refugees and migrants into Europe unless more international support is provided. Super Tuesday is going to come down to one major factor for the Democratic presidential contenders: delegates. And getting those delegates means that candidates have to meet a key threshold to make it to the convention. NewsHour Weekend special correspondent Jeff Greenfield explains.
We're bringing our people together.
The numbers are staggering. 14 states and one territory from one end of the continent to the other.
This is the moment, and it's arrived.
1,357 delegates at stake.
We are going to show them and surprise them.
Millions of voters, tens of millions of advertising dollars. But if you're looking for a number that will determine the outcome of Super Tuesday, there's really only one that matters: getting 15% of the vote. Why? It's because of the ground rules for how Democrats award delegates in the primaries.
Well, they're very significant, and one way to understand this is to compare the Democratic rules and the Republican rules.
There's no better guide to the way Democrats choose their nominees than Elaine Kamarck. She's been a member of the party's Rules Committee for more than 2 decades and literally wrote the book on how Americans nominate presidential candidates.
So the Democratic rules tend to favor not losers, but the second-place finishers, whereas the Republican Party rules tend to be winner-take-all by congressional district.
Democrats do award some delegates to a state's overall winner, but most of the delegates are based on how well they do in individual congressional districts. For comparison, just look at the last campaign. When Donald Trump won the New York Republican primary with 60% of the vote, he won 93% of the state's delegates. When Hillary Clinton won the New York Democratic primary with 58% of the vote, she got about 56% of the delegates, with Senator Bernie Sanders collecting the rest. Because Democrats do not have winner-take-all rules, you can win a fair number of delegates without actually winning a primary at all. But there's a catch. That 15% threshold can also dramatically boost a frontrunner in a crowded field. Take Senator Sanders in California, with its 415 pledged delegates. Polls not only show Sanders with a large statewide lead, they show every other candidate struggling to hit 15%. If no one else gets above that mark, Sanders would get all of the 144 statewide delegates. That's about a third of all the delegates in the state. If that holds true in many of California's 53 congressional districts, Sanders would get the lion's share of those remaining delegates as well. So it is conceivable that a candidate like Sanders could win a huge majority of the delegates with far less than a majority of voters. But those same rules that boost a contender in a crowded field can also make gaining ground in a narrowed field very hard. In the last 2 contested Democratic primaries, 2008 and 2016, there were only 2 major candidates, so getting to that 15% threshold wasn't hard at all. But making up serious ground was also nearly impossible with no winner-take-all contests. That's what doomed Clinton in her race against Barack Obama in 2008, and it's what guaranteed her victory over Sanders last time out.
She was winning enormous margins in the South. So her delegate lead over Bernie Sanders essentially carried her through the rest of the season and right on into the convention.
That's a similar dynamic we could see this year. If Sanders solidifies a significant delegate lead after Super Tuesday, even a winnowed field will have a hard time catching up. With Joe Biden's landslide win in South Carolina last night, here are the crucial questions Super Tuesday might answer. First, can Biden win most of those southern states where there's a significant black electorate? Second, what happens if none of the moderates drop out between now and Tuesday? Would they so divide the vote that none of them hits that 15% mark? And third, what if Bloomberg, despite his massive advertising, including primetime speeches tonight on CBS and NBC, finishes far behind Biden in the voting? A little more than 48 hours from now, Super Tuesday might give us much more clarity about the Democratic field, or leave it even more muddled than it is now.
All right, Jeff Greenfield joining us from California tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Harry.
For continuing coverage of the 2020 race ahead of Super Tuesday, visit pbs.org/newshour. You may not know the name Jim Marshall, but you certainly know his photographs. Collectively, his work is a near-complete account of the countercultural revolution, from photographing jazz clubs in the 1950s to backstage images with the Beatles and Woodstock. Few photographers covered as much ground as well as Jim Marshall. Notably talented, notably difficult, his longtime assistant witnessed his daily life and helped him curate a massive photography archive, compiling his most iconic images into a book and documentary. Show Me the Picture, the story of Jim Marshall. NewsHour Weekend's Christopher Booker has more.
There are 2 ways to consider the photographs of Jim Marshall. First, the technical. Few photographers working in the 60s and 70s could match his ability to work with and use natural light. The contrast in his images are a roadmap in how to exploit darks and lights. And second, proximity. Backstage and up close, his photos are unguarded, snapshots from the viewpoint of a very close friend. But to consider the work of Jim Marshall, you must also consider the way Jim Marshall worked. A process his longtime assistant, Amelia Davis, recently tried to explain in her documentary, Show Me the Picture, the story of Jim Marshall.
Look at my work. Look at my track record over 20 years of taking pictures. Look at my body of work. think it works?
Davis, also a photographer, met Marshall after college when he was looking for an assistant to work out of his home office.
We went to his apartment, and then I saw iconic photo after iconic photo. Johnny Cash flipping the bird, the Beatles coming on the stage at Candlestick Park, Jimmy burning his guitar. And I was mortified. And I said, oh my God, I had no idea that was you. And he smiled and he said, that's why I liked you.
But as Davis would learn, as many had before, working with Jim Marshall was not a simple proposition.
You either loved or hated Jim, and he either loved or hated you. And if he loved you, he was so generous, and he would lay down in front of a, oncoming truck. If he hated you, he would be the driver in that truck that ran you down. So that's the way Jim was.
At least there's no middle ground there.
There's no middle ground whatsoever.
Born and raised in San Francisco, Marshall picked up a camera after his time in the Air Force, taking photos in jazz clubs in the late 50s. While his music photos made him famous, he also worked chronicling poverty and the civil rights movement throughout the South.
Jim always wore about 5 Leicas around his neck. And he would always, the minute you started talking to him, he would just start clicking away. So at first, people were like, oh my God. But then you forget. They would forget that Jim had a camera, and they really opened up. And I always like to say that with Jim's photography, I never feel like I'm a voyeur. You feel like you're there.
One of Marshall's earliest relationships was with John Coltrane. Marshall met the saxophone player in San Francisco in 1960, and Marshall would go on to produce some of the most indelible images of the jazz legend. Most notably, a portrait of Coltrane on the street in Queens. There were more: Bob Dylan in Greenwich Village, Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison, and Miles Davis in the boxing ring. But with his success came excess.
I've always liked cars, guns, and cameras. Cars and guns have got me in trouble. Cameras haven't.
As Marshall's fame grew, so too did his reputation for being abrasive and difficult to work with, a situation made only worse by a growing cocaine addiction, one that would lead to arrests and a gun conviction.
I met Jim later on in his career in 1998. So he really wasn't doing a lot of photography. He was living off of his photographs. I mean, he was really well known at that point. He was selling in galleries. He did a lot of licensing. So he really didn't have to work anymore. And he was still doing a lot of cocaine.
You actually quit the job twice.
I did.
And came back twice.
I did.
What made you come back both times?
I kept coming back because it was the photography. There was this incredible photographer that took these amazing pieces of history, and I just thought it would be horrible if this was lost.
But there was a commercial benefit to Marshall's mercurial nature. His refusal to sign away the rights to his work proved to be a prescient decision.
Jim was fiercely protective of his own work. So he early on said, I'm never going to be a work for hire. I'm not going to work for a label where they own my photographs. The only way I'm going to work for somebody is an independent contractor, because then I own the photographs. And it did cost him, early on, it cost him a lot of jobs, but he was ahead of his time because then he owned those copyrights.
I mean, what's astonishing is thinking of the time. I mean, the Beatles weren't even thinking this way.
I know.
Paul McCartney has very famously been trying to get back his publishing rights.
Yeah.
Even acts like that weren't thinking about protecting their copyrights.
I know.
Why do you think he had that instinct?
I don't know. It's really interesting. It's one of those things. And same with photography. I mean, he was self-taught. He didn't go to school. So he was one of those rare cases where his brain, he could be really creative, but he could also be very organized and businesslike, where a lot of artists aren't.
Do you think Jim could work and succeed as he did in this era?
No. No. He would piss somebody off so much that, no, he would not be able to.
Jim Marshall died in his sleep in 2010, leaving his archive to Amelia Davis.
Now you are serving really as the steward and protector of his work. What happens to Jim's work and all of these images?
So we do a lot of books, we do a lot of shows. One of the reasons I did want to do the documentary was to connect the name to the photographs, because everybody has seen Jim Marshall photographs, but they don't know they're Jim Marshall photographs. And especially now, we're looking 50 years later, at a lot of these historical events, and we can learn from them what worked, what didn't, and be inspired with what Jim did.
Once a year, California's Yosemite National Park plays host to an impressive trick of sunlight and water on the vertical rock formation known as El Capitan. But warmer weather this year led to disappointment. Christopher Booker has more.
For a few weeks each February, a natural spectacle draws thousands of people to California's Yosemite National Park. It's called Firefall. It only lasts for a few minutes at sunset when the winter light hits the park's towering Horsetail Falls at just the right angle. But this year, there was no firefall. Patrick Gonzalez is a professor with the University of California, Berkeley. He says this year there wasn't enough water. The reason? Climate change.
The more snow that you have in the winter, the more water that you'll have coming over the falls. Our analyses show that total annual rainfall and snowfall has decreased across all of Yosemite National Park.
And Gonzalez says Firefall is not the only part of the park that's being impacted by climate change.
Our analyses of climate data show that human-caused climate change has heated the park 1.1 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Fahrenheit. That might not sound like a lot, but 1.1 degrees Celsius is the equivalent of pushing a mountain down 180 meters from cooler areas at high elevation to warmer areas below. In Yosemite and across the western US, human-caused climate change has doubled the area of wildfire burned, has doubled tree death, and has shifted trees upslope into meadows.
In recent years, due to concerns over the ecological damage that come with large crowds gathering in Yosemite, the National Park Service has tried to limit the number of people who come to watch Firefall. But as the climate continues to change, such restrictions may no longer be necessary.
With less than 48 hours to go before the next polls open, you can find the latest campaign news online at pbs.org/newshour. Tomorrow, NewsHour reporters will be in Super Tuesday states covering the race for the Democratic presidential nomination. That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Bernard and Irene Schwartz, Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Rosalind P. Walter, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments. Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.